You're really unique in the field of anthropology, I suppose, in a sense that you started out as an objective student of shamanism and eventually came out of the closet or transformed yourself into a practitioner.
Well, this sometimes happens to anthropologists, that they go native to some degree, and I think it's a respected and revered tradition in the field, but perhaps this is unique, that more than going native in a sense, I've decided that some of the things the natives have are very pertinent to our daily life today and badly needed. And so part of the work I'm doing is attempting to bring back shamanism to modern society.
I'm sure there's some of our viewers who probably don't know what the word shamanism really means.
Well, that's quite natural. In fact, that's one of the reasons we use that word, because it doesn't have previous connotations for many people. The word itself comes from Siberia, from the Tungus tribe, and it's shaman there. And the Europeans who first saw much of shamanism saw it in Russia, in Siberia, and described it. And the shaman is a kind of medicine person, but there are some very specific characteristics that one should note. The shaman goes into an altered state of consciousness when doing his or her work, either men or women, maybe shamans. And this is often brought on by monotonous drumming. The shaman is a person who makes journeys. You might call them out-of-body journeys, to use current terminology, but or journeys of the imagination, if you will, though many of us think there's more to it than that. To an upper world, to a lower world, here in the middle world. And these journeys are done for very practical purposes, such as to gain knowledge. Shamans are often called persons of knowledge. And they work to help solve problems in their community, healing and other problems of daily life.
People might think of them under such terms as a witch doctor or a sorcerer.
Yeah, there are many terms like that. The problem with those terms is that they have ancient histories in Europe and mean many different things, often of a pejorative nature. So it's best to wipe the slate clean, use the word shaman, and look closely at what does the person really do. Because not all, let's say, witch doctors, not all medicine people are really shamans. Many of them are priests, tribal priests, that do very beautiful and valuable work for their peoples, but don't necessarily fit into the category of shaman.
Now, you began a lot of your research in South America, in the Amazon region, working with the Jivaro, who are used to practice the art of headhunting.
Yes, of course, this was widespread in many parts of the world, and not unknown in Europe, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
But in that part of the world, shamanism, when I first went down there, was still quite strong. It is still strong in many areas there. And just as a matter of course, as an anthropologist, I had to study it as part of the local culture, and I found it fascinating. But for some time, I remained just an outside observer. And then on another expedition, a later expedition to the Conibo Indians in eastern Peru, the Indians said, well, if I really wanted to learn about what they were talking about, that I had to do it, get into it, and they gave me a certain drug that they use. In that part of the world, unlike most parts of the world where they do shamanism, they use psychedelic drugs, and I discovered just in a few hours that there was a whole amazing world that we really in anthropology hadn't realized existed.
And that was back in the early 60s, I guess.
Yes, that was 1961, and at that time I knew nothing about psychedelic drugs and so on. In fact, very, very few people had even heard of them at that time.
That was the ayahuasca plant, I believe.
Ayahuasca, yes. And the vine of the dead, it's sometimes called, or taking it, sometimes called the little death, because it gave you entrance into what we now call a near-death experience, but it also was an opportunity to increase your own knowledge of the, well, what Castaneda called non-ordinary reality, and in that way improve your own life and permit you to help other people in certain ways that wouldn't be possible if you were just stuck in an ordinary state of consciousness.
What struck me in your description of this in The Way of the Shaman is that after you had this drug-induced experience, you met with one of the elder shamans, a blind man, and described your experiences to him, which were quite detailed, visionary types of experiences, and he seemed to understand exactly where you had been and what you had experienced.
Yes, that was a critical point for me, because here I'd had these experiences which are so incredible, and then I went to the shaman, and he dealt with them quite matter-of-factly. There were certain creatures who said certain things about how they were really running the planet, and he just smiled and says, "Oh, they're always saying that," and so on. And I realized from that and many other things that he was quite familiar with the terrain that I had been to.
You also remark in your book that the same terrain was covered, at least in part, in some of the sections of the Book of Revelations in the Bible.
Yes, I think, see, through the years, I've followed this, of course, more and more intensely, and it's clear to me, although there are obviously cultural differences in mythologies and cultural differences in experiences in journeying and shamanic cultures, that there are remarkable uniformities in this hidden reality, uniformities that are beyond culture, beyond individual experience. And you'll find great similarities between experiences of great Christian mystics and experiences of shamans, experiences in the near-death situation, and so on. And this is fascinating to me, because I was trained as a cultural anthropologist, and I was told that culture did everything. And now it looks like maybe culture isn't the last word about everything.